Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to SVB Bank, and thanks to Silicon Valley Bank for providing this wonderful center for us to have this discussion today. My name is Frank Lavin. I'm delighted to represent the Asia Society today, where I serve on the Board of Trustees. And this is, I would say, a characteristic program, although I think the talent and the substance we hear today is...
We can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. I say I represent the Asia Society. I'm delighted to welcome everybody here. Special thanks to SVB Bank for hosting this event. And I'd say the Asia Society sponsors a series of substantive discussions and presentations and events in the Bay Area. But I would just comment that I suspect, given the caliber of the individuals presenting and participating today, this will be one of the better ones. The caliber of the individuals and the subject matter itself. If I may just take a minute and make one particular reference. I came into the U.S. Commerce Department in the George W. Bush administration as Undersecretary for International Trade, and we had a problem. We looked at trade statistics monthly to try to understand where we were going and where the world was going and what steps we had to take on international trade. And we got a monthly readout of the top 25 trading partners. And that accounted for 90+% of U.S. trade. India wasn't on the list. India was not in the top 25. So I said, look, I understand the utility of 25. Let's take this out to 30, because India was number 28 or something. So we took it out to 30 just so India would always be part of the conversation. And India, we could set up some bilateral mechanisms to work on some of the India trade issues, which we did. By the way, I just, in preparation for today's discussion, India, depending on the month of the year, India is number 9 or number 10 U.S. trading partner. So India's done extraordinary in 20 years. It's more or less tripled its trade with the United States. And that's really a reflection on India, that India, I think, wisely sees that internationalization and liberalization and outperformance in economic growth has contributed considerably to success of India. And I think that's one of the topics we're going to get in today. Let me thank everybody for coming. Thank you on behalf of the Asia Society. And turn it over to our host for today, Andy Tsao from SVB. Thank you, Andy.
So again, I'd like to welcome everybody to tonight's Asia Society Northern California event, where we're going to be discussing Silicon Valley Bank's recent State of the Market India report. My name is Andy Tsao. I'm a board member at the Asia Society of Northern California as well. The bank has been a long time partner to the Asia Society. I think you can tell from Frank's intro, and if you've never been to an Asia Society event, I certainly encourage you to attend. There's always some really great speakers and always a really interesting discussion. Hopefully tonight will be along the same lines. I'm also a managing director at Silicon Valley Bank and head of what we call Global Gateway. And Global Gateway is a business that's about 12 years old now at the bank. And today we're effectively the center for international business development in international markets at Silicon Valley Bank. And that has included, of course, India. Let's talk about tonight's program. So we're going to start with my colleague, Liz Cahill, who's the author of our report. And she's going to be presenting the findings and conclusions that we have from the report. Let's keep it very interactive. It's not it's an intimate crowd, so and a lot of really smart people in the room. So we'd love if you have questions, please feel free to voice them. And then we're going to go to my teammate Ella Adhanan, who is our India market lead, and she's going to be doing speaking to a great group of investors and founders. We have Priya, Jishnu, and Kirthiga here. Ella will more properly introduce them shortly. And then we're going to wrap up in about an hour's time and open up some wine to do some networking. For those that don't know, Silicon Valley Bank's only side business is premium wine. And so we have many clients in Napa, Sonoma, as well as in Oregon. And we're going to be trying some wine from our client from Willamette Valley in Oregon, a winery called Elk Cove. They make a very nice Pinot Noir. We'll be trying some of that along with their Pinot Grigio. So we can look forward to that. And despite the many changes that we've had at Silicon Valley Bank this year. Today we are now a division of First Citizens Bank, and we're 7 months into that integration and partnership with First Citizens, and I can tell you as a 27-year veteran at the bank that things are going so well, considering where we were in March, and we have very good line of sight into Silicon Valley Bank being SVB, yes, SVB again, doing the very same things that we've always done with the innovation economy over the past 40 years. And we continue to see that innovation is truly global, and hence tonight's program and our State of Markets India report. When you look at our history at the bank with India, actually goes back for more than 20 years. In early 2023, we led a pretty well-known delegation of top-tier U.S. investors. Mostly at that time, they were all on Sand Hill Road. We took them for a week of immersion in India, and it wasn't long after that the major firms began setting up dedicated funds in India. In fact, our first office was kind of like a co-working space in Bangalore where investors could come and kind of work out of and meet companies while they were visiting India. And we then set up a seed fund, so we're investing in startups that we could refer to some of our investor friends. That a few years ago spun off to becoming what today is known as Sama Capital. And we also pioneered venture lending. That's something we do quite a lot of at the bank, so providing debt financing for startup companies. In this case, it was in India, and that business was also spun off to Temasek in about 2015 timeframe. And that business still exists today, called Innoven. So that was another part of our history with India. In 2015 timeframe, Global Gateway, my team picked up coverage for India from a cross-border perspective because we saw so much activity happening there, and we continue to view India as a very strategic market for us. If you look at the venture ecosystem in India over that time frame, there's obviously been tremendous growth and maturity of the ecosystem. You can only look back 2 years ago at 2021, where that was the kind of peak year for the global venture bubble for those in the business, but that was the peak year of funding, ever for almost any market, including India, which tripled that year, more than tripled, from 11 billion invested, that's VCs investing into startups, to over $37 billion that year, becoming the third largest market for venture capital deployment behind the US and China. Of course, this year we're in a very, very different market. Again, it's not just an Indian phenomenon. The entire world is going through a tech correction, and the Q3 numbers just came out. India had about 1.5 billion of venture deployed. So they're on track for maybe $5 or $6 billion this year. And again, just comparing the 37 of 2021, it's quite a different market today. But I think the investors, our clients, the founders, many of them here in the room, remain very, very bullish and confident about the prospects of building fantastic companies, whether it's using technology to solve local problems, and you can just look at the government initiatives around UPI and payments, and what they're doing there is really quite remarkable. And of course, tech companies are selling to global markets, what people refer to as India for the world. And we are seeing great SaaS companies coming from India as an example. Companies like Freshworks, like Darwinbox, really exciting. India is becoming sort of a global SaaS hub. So as I wrap up my comments, obviously it's like India's time in the sun right now. There's been so many, big milestones hit this year. Whether it's the retaining the moniker of being the fastest growing large economy in the world, or becoming the most populous country in the world, overtaking China, but yet having a very young population with 50% of the population being under 30 still. And, and I love to talk about how, of course, India put a lunar module on the south side of the moon, being the first country to do so, and the fourth country to land on the moon at all. So a lot to be excited about for India in general. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Liz.
Awesome. Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Asia Society, and everyone that's here. I'm Liz Cahill. I've been at Silicon Valley Bank for 6 years, and this is my second year in a row working on the State of the Markets India. And I consider this to be my Phoenix report because as we went through our trouble in March, we were just starting to think about the next India report. And I was reaching out to Andy and Ella, and we were like, hey, can we restart this report? And this carried us through the summer and gave me a lot of hope as I was working on it. Like Andy said, this has been a fantastic year for India. World's largest, most populous nation, putting, a lunar landing south side of the moon. And I think that speaks to so much that is very symbolic, that moon landing, because India was able to execute something that was technically very difficult and logistically very difficult, and do so in a really cost-effective way. So to be able to build world-class, infrastructure and do it in a cost-effective way is just, something that is so special about India. So this report is available on our website. It's ungated. You can read the whole report. I'm just going to share a few slides in order to stay within our 20 minutes and Evan, keep me honest on time so we can get to the fabulous panel. Let's see, I can turn my clicker on. So first I'm gonna start with this macro slide to kind of paint the picture if you're not as familiar with the India market. And if you are, please keep me honest. This, as Andy said, should be an interactive session. So if you have questions or have a comment, just shout it out. So right now, technology is about a little over 7% of India's GDP, and NASSCOM, which is the big governing body for India's technology industry, is anticipating this to reach about 10% in 2025, and that's about 1% growth a year. I think that's doable. And the cool thing about India, that as an outsider coming in to research this space 2 years ago, was discovering how sophisticated their digital infrastructure is. And if you're not, if you're in India, this is super familiar. But if you're coming in as an outsider and looking at it, it is astonishing. India has been able to build a lot of incredible infrastructure, digitally leapfrogging, in the US and a lot of Europe. We have a very entrenched government bureaucracy. It's really hard to make reforms and make changes, but India was able to start from scratch and build a lot of very innovative infrastructure that's open source, secure, and tied to biometrics. So one of the biggest innovations is UPI, which I describe this as like a nationwide Venmo. It's peer-to-peer. It's also B2B. It's a big payment network that is just transactions through digital wallets. So you go to a market in a neighborhood, and there's a fruit vendor, and they have a QR code, and you can make very small transactions on the UPI system. And this is incredible because India was mostly a cash-based society before this, and in 2016 you had demonetization. You had a lot of push to get people to adopt digital means of payment. And India also doesn't have they have very low credit card penetration, which is something that's pretty interesting. It's just not part of the culture of the commerce there for consumers, everyday consumers, to have credit cards. So this digital transaction network is incredible, and they're on track to have about 2 trillion in transactions in 2023. And this only started in 2016. So that is an incredible up and to the right graph. We love up and to the right graphs, and UPI just delivers. And a lot of these transactions are happening over Indian companies that are running these transactions. So PhonePe and Paytm, Cred, and others are making up over half of the payment rails for these transactions. So the whole stack is Indian companies. And so this is a really incredible thing. UPI is now being exported to other countries and piloted. So India is really leading the world in terms of digital infrastructure. And they have such a huge population, so you really need a scalable, if anyone needs like a scalable, efficient tech solution, it is India. They have a huge population, they need to serve that population, it's growing. So that digital infrastructure has been a huge help. And then foreign direct investment is a huge part of India's economy. So, manufacturing has become a really big priority in India. There is the Make in India initiative with the government really trying to push for this. You're seeing a lot of smartphone manufacturing shifting to India with geopolitical tensions with China. India is becoming a really attractive place, again, also because of that talent pool to access that. So you have the Samsungs of the world, you have the Foxcons of the world coming in to increase that amount of manufacturing, as well as big tech companies like the Amazons, the Alphabets, the Facebook and Microsofts of the world coming in and building research and development centers. So there's a lot of development happening in India from international tech companies. It did go down a bit in 2023. This had computer software and hardware is actually the biggest chunk. If you go on and break out this data by sector, computer software and hardware makes up the largest piece of FDI in India by industry. And it has gone down a bit this year, and some of that has to do with higher interest rates have kind of slowed down a lot of these big transactions. Most of these transactions are all done with lots of debt involved, and as debt has, become exponentially more expensive, this does slow down a lot of these big transactions. And you see that in the slowdown in venture investing as well. Higher interest rates just kind of affect everyone and affect everything in the economy. So we have seen some slowdown, but there's still been a lot of growth in this area. Yeah.
I think the slowdown might also have been due to the fact that the Indian government recently banned certain computer imports to India.
That's true. You have seen that too. Yeah. So there's been some policy that I think is well intended to help develop local manufacturing of computers, but it's also kind of slowing things down as well. So there's some policy in there. I did see that. I also wanted to end this slide on this kind of digital funnel. So, India has a massive population, but a small piece of that population is kind of that top level of folks that are subscribing to Netflix, buying stuff online. So that population that has the most spending power is the smallest chunk of India's population. But then, you have 850 million about internet users, 600 million smartphone users, and for reference, the US population is 330 million people. So just the sheer scale of this population, even though only a small percentage of that population is doing most of the spend, it's still just incredible to see how many people are digitally enabled in India, much larger than the US. So even though much of that population doesn't have a ton of purchasing power, it's just incredible to see how many people are connected to the internet, are using social media. And it goes back to this UPI transactions. You have people that can make very small transactions digitally, so everything becomes much more streamlined, much more traceable. So this is pretty incredible. And then hopping over to VC investment, as Andy mentioned, globally venture investment has pulled back. This is not unique to India. So with India, we're seeing this year will probably be about where we were in 2020. I projected, at the halfway point of this year in July that we'd be at about $12 billion. I'll have to wait till December to see how good of a psychic I am. Mostly it's just doing some very simple extrapolation. So we're back where we were at 2020 levels, and this is consistent mostly throughout the globe. So looking at India and the UK, depending on when you slice the data and sometimes who's doing the slicing, India is either the third or fourth position in the world for venture markets. It's very close. It's very to the UK. And between Q2 2020 and Q2 2021, India grew 120% in terms of VC funding. So it went way up. It grew more than the US, more than China. China's been mostly flat during that time period. But then coming down, it contracted about 70%. So it went up way more than everyone else, but then pulled back a little bit more than everyone else too. But we're still consistent with the US, looking at about 2020 level of funding. And this pullback has to do with a few things. Some of it is those higher interest rates. Also, public markets went down quite a bit in 2022 globally, and that spooked a lot of LPs. Suddenly, LPs had to deal with their public market portfolios, and also venture became an outsized part of their allocation. If your public market portfolio goes down, the venture allocation becomes a lot larger, just simple math. And so there's been less of an appetite for venture. Also in 2021, valuations went up exponentially. There was a lot of money chasing, not that many deals, so you saw venture valuations just exploding everywhere. And now investors are waiting for things to cool down and waiting to see where pricing will reset to. There is a lot of dry powder that funds have committed. It's not cash they have in the bank, but it's capital committed. So the commitments do exist, but investors are being a lot more judicious on how they deploy this funding. In terms of funds with India focus, we see in 2023 that there's a lot of first-time funds that have announced or are raising. Many of these funds are really early stage, and it's a first-time fund. So we'll have to wait and see if these funds actually close. I think a lot of these funds probably kicked off conversations of raising in 2021 when things were really hot. So I don't think we'll see all of these funds close. And many of these are small first-time funds, and those are the funds that are having the hardest time. One of the things I did notice, though, when I was doing my research was that in India, you're seeing a lot more corporate venture come out of some of these startups in India. So Games 24/7, CarTrade, CoinSwitch, NinjaCart, all of these large later stage venture-backed companies in India are starting to build out their own corporate venture arms, which is pretty cool and just speaks to that flywheel that's emerging in India's tech scene. So a lot of successful, more established companies are starting to then fund the next generation of companies. And I know I did speak about, a pullback in funding, but it's not to say there hasn't been some spectacular deals. I think one of the most exciting one was PhonePe, which spun out of Flipkart and has had a ton of investment this year, about $750 million in late-stage VC. And that was in several tranches, but there's been a lot of excitement, and that, if we look back, that's one of the big, transaction rails for UPI, so that is understandable. Baiju's has raised a ton of money this year. They've had some tough headlines this year, but they're still raising. Ola Electric, you have CreditBee, Zepto, and Mintify. Zepto is actually so far the only new unicorn this year in India, and right as we were about to go to press, they raised their round, so that was very exciting. We had to go in and last minute change the report to make sure we included them in that great round that they did. So, let's see. All right. Oops. Unicorns, so SaaS. India has a massive SaaS market. A lot of great global SaaS companies have come out of India. And, India has the advantage of having a massive talent pool, and also it's much cheaper to start a business in India. So Indian SaaS companies have a huge advantage in the global market for SaaS because they can just do it really well, and it's more cost effective. The cool thing that we found is that, companies that have a deep bench of talent, like the Zohos of the world, will create a flywheel that will develop the next generation of founders. So, Freshworks came out of, and Chargebee came out of, Zoho alumni, and Zoho, Freshworks, and Chargebee alumni are then starting other companies. So there's this really fantastic flywheel that's happening. And we did see 2021 a big year for SaaS unicorns, and there haven't been any this year yet in SaaS, but there's several companies that are on the cusp of that status. And then I did find that Indian SaaS valuations have held up more than US and UK companies, so that is pretty cool. And investment in SaaS, again, has gone down this year. It's hard, depending on who's slicing this data, I've seen these numbers vary widely. Some people include fintech as part of SaaS. This is just purely enterprise software companies, not fintech. It has gone down again, but there's still some great deals happening and some great companies. Of course, generative AI is the big topic that a lot of these SaaS founders are talking about right now, and many of them are planning to either incorporate that into their businesses, or there's net new companies starting in this space. So a lot of growth there. And then exits and unicorns. So last year when I did this report, India had hit its 100th unicorn, and that was a huge deal. That was all over the media. And we decided this year to look at those unicorns and see where are they now. And about 84% are still unicorns. They're still private companies valued at $1 billion or more. A few of them have fallen off and a few of them have exited, but most of those companies are still unicorns. And then quickly, public markets. India's major tech indices have been mostly flat, down slightly, but things have popped up a little bit this year. And some of the newly public tech companies have had a wild ride, going down precipitously in 2022, facing some hard markets, but are starting to bounce back. And because public markets have been pretty tough, there haven't been many IPOs in the US, globally, it's just been a pretty big freeze. For India, there's been only 2 VC-backed tech IPOs year to date this year, but still a good number of IPOs. We're finding that there's a big backlog of IPOs, so several companies are in the filing process and just waiting for markets to improve, so we're hoping end of year. I know in the US we have Instacart and a few other companies starting to go out and go public, so we're thinking markets are gonna start to thaw. And again, acquisitions are also down again because of some of that has to do with higher interest rates, making it just more expensive and cumbersome to do these transactions. But we did find that, more companies in India are choosing to go public on Indian exchanges, and that's because some of the work that SEBI has done to streamline some of the regulation. There's an abundance of capital available in India too. There's a lot of people investing in the markets in India. So it's not always worth the extra rigmarole and regulatory burden to go public on a US exchange. So I think this is a really great sign for India's markets, that there's like a healthy IPO market in India. There's good exchanges to go public on, so more companies are just choosing to stay in India when they decide to go public. And then the last slide I'm going to end on is our diaspora slide. So India has the world's largest diaspora in addition to the world's largest population. So there is an India that exists globally beyond borders. And there was over $100 billion from the diaspora sent back to India in the form of remittances in 2022. And that's actually bigger than foreign direct investment, which is incredible. So the diaspora is engaged, they are prosperous, and that means there's a lot of cross-border activity in tech especially. So we do highlight some fantastic cross-border tech organizations. And, globally you see major world leaders, tech company CEOs, major investors who are of Indian origin. So this just speaks to the health of the ecosystem here. It's just a really incredible community. I've been able to meet some awesome people and just really see the passion and the purpose of the India diaspora. So that's all for the report. I'm going to hand it over to Ella next to start our panel.
Do you want to take questions?
Yeah, I was going to say, are there any questions? I have a few minutes left, maybe like 1 or 2 minutes. 1 minute left. I have time for like one question, but I'll also be here afterwards with some of the wine. So if you want to come up and talk to me or debate me. Yes, in the back.
What are your biggest concerns about it?
Biggest concerns, I think some of it the regulatory stuff can be difficult, like well-intentioned regulations, like banning like certain like tech imports. Well-intentioned, but can also be, can also have a lot of unintended consequences. Same with demonetization. I think it came with good intentions, but had a ton of downstream consequences that made it very difficult for people living there day to day. So not careful regulations, I think, are the biggest challenges. Yes?
Have you just to look at the, sort of the pros or cons, or what are the ways that Indian companies can go public on NASDAQ? And why is it not happening at a slightly higher?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is many tech companies are just staying private longer. You see that trend across the board. Globally, that's happening. So a lot of companies are choosing to just stay private. And the ones that do go public, do you want to put up with the extra scrutiny and the extra work? If you have an abundance of capital just staying private, if you're fine staying private, it's really less appealing to go public now because you put yourself up for more regulatory scrutiny, more work. If you have enough capital, why do it? It's mostly just for like the prestige sometimes. And also, markets in India are pretty solid and established, and the SEBI has made it easier. They've eliminated a lot of red tape and become a lot more transparent over time. And they actually changed the regulation in 2021 to allow non-profit-making companies to go public, which was a new regulatory change that was very friendly to tech companies. Yeah. All right, I think I can get started with the panel, Ella and friends, but I'll be around afterwards. I'd love to talk and meet more folks.
Okay, if that didn't convince you of the India opportunity, I hope that the next panel will. Hi, everybody, and thank you again for coming on a Wednesday evening. My name is Ella-Tamar. As Andy mentioned, I lead both India and Israel markets for Silicon Valley Bank. So I think for me, I've been covering India for the last 3 years, and it has been such an honor working with the founders and investors, seeing that growth on a macro level, but also really on the innovation space where we all work and part from. Seeing that front row and seeing the tremendous talent, the very mature founders, and obviously our investors are playing a huge role in that growth as well. So without further ado, I would like to introduce my amazing panelists. We will sort of dive deeper into what we've heard earlier from Andy and Liz, just give you a more broader or maybe perhaps specific picture of the opportunity that India is experiencing both at home, but also globally. So thank you, all of you, for coming today. I'm gonna take a few minutes just introducing them. Like India, they're overachievers, so give me a few moments here. I'm gonna start with Jishnu. Jishnu Bhattacharjee is the managing director at Nexus Venture Partners, leading US-India venture capital that invests in innovative technologies globally, with focus on AI, technology infrastructure, software, consumer internet, fintech. Jishnu and the firm have invested in over 100 companies, both in the US and India. He currently serves on the boards of Postman, Dhruva, H20i, Absorb AI, and other exciting companies. But really what's interesting is a fun fact, I would say impressive one, is that he's an inventor. He has 20, or say over 20 US patents. So, I did mention overachiever, so thank you, Jishnu, for coming. Next up, Kirthiga. Kirthiga Reddy is the CEO of Virtualness, a high-growth, venture-backed Web3 startup company. Kirthiga has over 20 years of experience leading technology-driven transformation. Virtualness is backed by Polygon Ventures, Blockchain Ventures, Micron Ventures, and other notable individuals. And fun fact, I do know Nas Daly, and I didn't realize he's one of your investors. So I'm pretty excited about that. Kirthiga is also the president of Athena Technology, a series of all-women-led SPACs that provides access to capital and transaction experience for market leaders in equity capital markets, and the founding investment partner of F7 Seed Fund, and has also co-founded Liftery, a social impact initiative focused on empowering working women and advancing a career of 10 million moms. Thank you, Kirthiga. Last but not least, we have Priya. Priya Saiprasad, co-founder and general partner of Turing Capital, a venture capital firms investing in AI-powered B2B software companies at the early growth stage across the world, with over 13 years of experience in venture capital, M&A, enterprise technology. Priya brings a wealth of knowledge to her role. Prior to Turing Capital, she served as the partner of SoftBank Vision Fund, where she led the investments in notable software companies like Pixis, Absorb AI, again, I'm seeing overlap, Commerce IQ, and other exciting companies as well. She was also a member of the Mayfield Fund, focused on early growth investments, and a founding member of M12, a Microsoft Venture Fund, where she led investments in companies like Element AI, that later was acquired by ServiceNow, and Bonsai, which was acquired by Microsoft. And additionally, Priya worked previously as a deal lead in the Square's M&A team, specializing in software and machine learning acquisition. So I hope you got all of that. Thank you guys for coming. So I feel like, I don't want to repeat what my colleagues say, but it's sort of very hard not to be excited on the recent achievement that India has had, both at home but also globally. We mentioned a few of them, hosting the G20 summit, Prime Minister Modi's visit to the US, and obviously becoming the world's most populous country, surpassing China at 1.4 billion people and counting. But really also, negotiating and signing free trade agreements with several countries. So really increasing, and we're seeing the rising global influence of the country, not to mention the India diaspora that Liz has mentioned, and all of you are part of course. So, looking at all this, and this is just recent achievements, and we didn't even talk on the, this different initiatives that are happening at home, how these recent achievements, and obviously you feel free to talk about different initiatives that you're seeing, is impacting India's image as a hub for innovation and obviously attracting investments. No pressure.
I can start. I know you said how does it impact India's image for innovation? And closer.
Mike.
Mic is not on.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay. This is better. Yeah. So I know the question was, how does it impact India's image? Image almost seems to come across as reality versus image, but I think I want to talk about the reality of innovation that and the hub that India is. My journey before my current startup was I was the first employee for Facebook in India and their managing director for India and South Asia, and then had also the fortune of being in SoftBank with Priya, investing from SoftBank Vision Fund from here in the US. And when I started Facebook in India, we had less than 100 million people on the internet in the country, okay? And today this is for a country of 1.4 billion people. Today it's over 700 million people. And by the way, if you think that this was decades and decades, we're now talking about, 12 years. And all of the metrics there, even the growth of the digital ad ecosystem, it was in the hundreds of millions. Facebook India today is a $2 billion annual revenue business, again, in a matter of a decade. So as you think about all of those charts, and if we look at where we are now, and if we project out a decade, I will tell you that India's potential and reality will far exceed our wildest imagination, and it's very exciting to be here. I will also add that my startup Virtualness banks with SVB, and we kept all our money there. We did diversify a little bit just because diversification is good, but SVB is our primary bank for both Virtualness as well as F7.
Okay, I'm audible, I guess. Thank you very much for having me here. So lot of good things have already been mentioned. Maybe I can talk about some of the personal experience I had investing in the country, in India for last 15 years and as a firm for last 16 years. When we started, at that time, venture ecosystem was pretty nascent, and the whole idea was, I think Andy touched upon, that India can be what we say, the way we explain it. So basically innovation for both for local and global markets. So we started seeing India as sort of a hybrid of China and Israel. China, all the value creation, tremendous value creation that has happened mostly targeting the domestic market. Israel, 9 million people country, probably 100 plus companies are getting traded today in the US. India is a nice blend of the two, and at that time it was the potential. And the potential because the country was just at the cusp of digitization for what you today call digital India, is basic needs, how do you serve them better? India didn't know any better in a sense that, it was not about already an infrastructure being there which you are upgrading. Rather, it was about pen and paper, leapfrogging into a completely digital architecture, digital economy, which in many cases, if you just compare apples to apples, many things in America will look like ancient. I think the scales have been mentioned, but some things I would, like the way we are venture capital fund, the way we look at investments, there are, I would say, 3-4 vectors have been phenomenal over the last decade, which India as a country is very proud of, and I think all of us associated with India are very proud of. I would say the first thing is, of course, the mobile data revolution. There are many houses today who do not have TVs, but they have phones. There are households where there are 2 phones, where one is used as router, the other is for speaking. And that router is for entertainment, because that's how people consume entertainment. Mobile data rate is unbelievable. The data rate that is out there in the country is unbelievable. People can't even think of. We talked about UPI. The beauty is that less than only a few cents of worth of transactions can be done free of cost instantly, and anybody can do it. Taxation, that has been another huge, it's called goods and services tax in India, and how the entire infrastructure has been brought under the digital regime. I'm bringing these things out because, if you look at in India obviously, there are a lot of challenges, a lot of infrastructural challenges and all that. We see as an innovation economy, how those challenges can be turned into opportunity, and technology becomes an enabler. Today, using many of these kind of digital footprints and digital kind of abilities, the level of the way needs are being served for millions of, there are more than 700 million people on the internet, and 700 million, maybe few, let's call it around 400, 500 million people who are transacting today for all day-to-day needs. It's the impact that technology is having in the country in changing people's lives. I mean, here, obviously, I had the good opportunity of being in Stanford, where we say that, our motto is changing lives, changing people, changing organizations. The digital innovation economy, what it's doing in India, and seeing how people's lives are changing, people who have been earning few dollars a day, is just game changer. And sorry, I've taken a lot of time.
No problem. Wow, I'm so inspired, Jishnu. That was incredible. And I guess the only thing I'd add to both of what you've said, first of all, this is such an inspiring conversation that we're even having over here. And we actually launched, we picked the best year to launch a net new venture fund, right? So we launched a new venture firm earlier this year, and actually 50% of the fund is scheduled to invest in India, Australia, and just a few other geographies outside of the US. India is actually a large part of our strategy, and I'm taking some notes from Jishnu and what Nexus has done so well. Can you hear me better? Perfect. So I'm taking a lot of notes from what Jishnu and the Nexus team have done so well over the last 20 years. But we are actively focused on India, and we're focused on India for a couple of reasons. So what I've noticed over the last decade in terms of software companies that have been formed from India is focus on fundamentals and focus on cost effectiveness while being thoughtful about the balance between growth as well as efficiency and how you're getting there. And the talent in India has risen so much over time. I mean, we have some of the largest software engineers over there. We also have some of the largest AI talent and contribution to open source projects that's happening that's going to really pave the path for the next decade. And so that's super exciting to me. But in addition to that, if you see some of the sort of excesses of 2020 and 2021 that happened, a lot of these software startups in India actually didn't fall victim to that trap of just chasing growth at all costs, right? If you notice, on average, we actually did a little study of US startups at the same stage as well as Indian startups. On average, the efficiency rate significantly higher for Indian SaaS startups, right? So that focus and grounding on the fundamentals, but also really being at the forefront of AI innovation really will drive the next generation of enterprise software. So I'm super excited about that.
Can you hear me? Well, you have the microphone. You mentioned the AI opportunity and obviously SaaS, and I know that your firm is, sort of focusing on, B2B software companies that are leveraging AI. Maybe if you can share with us, what are you seeing in maybe in your portfolio companies or otherwise, that how are you seeing SaaS companies that are actually, adapting to AI and leveraging AI into their current product offering?
Yeah, that's a great question, because if you're starting a company today, a software company, let's say this year, you're likely thinking of generative AI native company, right? But a lot of companies, wonderful software companies, have been started within, call it, the last 3 to 4 years, right? So what happens to your tech structure and tech architecture at that point? The interesting thing is, chasing generative AI just because it's the latest sexy trend isn't the solution, but instead the solution is, how do you deliver a better product to your end customer, right? How do you increase the ROI that you're delivering to that customer? If you're a marketing software, how do you save on ad dollars or marketing budgets if you're at any part of the software stack, right? And there are elements of generative AI that can help enhance productivity and efficiency gains, almost 10x of what was possible before. So because of that, existing sort of, call it that 3 to 4 years ago started wave of software companies are now actively looking at, are there ways for generative AI to actually advance across the board, productivity across the whole stack, right? So actually our first investment that we made from Turing Capital is a company called Pixis.ai. India? Yeah, exactly. And so Pixis actually started about 4 years ago, and their initial product was created for the digital marketeer, and it leveraged machine learning to the fullest, right? It wasn't actually generative AI. It was machine learning to help you optimize your spend across different social media channels and change it in real time. ROI was phenomenal for customers. The digital marketeer loved them. They earned the trust, right? And now they've launched their second product that leverages generative AI, and it also helps significantly from an ROI perspective, because now as an advertiser or a digital marketeer, you can say a text prompt and instantly ads are generated for certain cohort groups that you're trying to target, right? And that's a novel use of generative AI. It also is catered for a particular buyer, and it's not creating generative AI apps for the sake of it. It's going after a true business use case, right? So I think there's going to be so much more of this that happens across the board.
Absolutely. I think we're also seeing Freshwork and Zoho, prime companies that are actually leveraging AI to deliver better versus, having that as the foundation of your company. But maybe Jishnu and Kirthiga, if you want to add to the AI opportunity.
Yeah, even if I think of the journey of my company, Virtualness, so we are at the intersection of generative AI and blockchain. And in the world of generative AI, we believe the need for authenticated digital assets that blockchain gives is even more important. But our pitch in October did not have generative AI, right? Because that was, again, October. But then we immediately saw the opportunity, and we really embraced Gen AI most as a first principle construct. And we allow people to generate digital assets, digital goods, all of the imagery using Gen AI, mint it on the blockchain, be able to trade without ever needing to have cryptocurrency. And that was a quick evolution to embrace the newest technology stack. And I'll tell you, tying it back to India, our team is distributed across, even as we were bootstrapping, across 4 countries, US, Singapore, India, and Dubai. We had our investors ask us, is there enough blockchain talent? And we found, we hired people in tier 2, tier 3 India. It's a fully hybrid team. We found someone, for example, in Coimbatore, which is, again, tier 2, I would say, maybe tier 1.5. But there was someone there who had worked on blockchain for 5 years with Fortune 500 companies, and we were amazed at the talent we found across the country, and it really gave us a huge advantage in how we built the company.
adding to some of the points that both of you mentioned, I think generative AI is definitely a huge inflection, a technology inflection, and what it has enabled is that the ability to embed AI and come up with AI features for the existing companies, incumbents who are not Gen AI native, has never been easier. And case in point, I would say that the biggest moat that we are seeing in companies and we look for would be what you call workflow moat and data moat. Like if you already have users who are using your product and you are having the data that you need to build AI products, then to release the features using AI is not that difficult. And more importantly, more people will be using your product will get better. So that is, I think, a sea change in terms of how software has been built. I would say generative AI has also opened up a lot of, I would say, exposures, additional exposures to governance risk, cybersecurity risk, privacy risk, regulatory compliance issues. Because now, if you can think of, like, it has gone to a level that all these foundation models can be seen as also condensed data stores. So in a way, there are examples where inadvertently companies, like if it is not done right, then it can expose a lot of sensitive data, a lot of privacy identifiable data, which one cannot. So one cannot do or cannot expose. So a lot of questions, I would say, and a lot of challenges for entrepreneurs to work on. And to that note, maybe one point I would say, since you're talking about India, I think the way we think of at least AI investment, and it's correct that what Priya said, that all software companies will be AI-enabled one way or the other. The stack consists of infrastructure, then models, tooling, and applications. We expect more things to come out of India in the application layer. In India, the engineers, India is the largest developer hub, and we are very good in using open source, and a lot of fantastic resources today are actually available in open source in AI, and we are seeing very innovative ways of using those open source tools to come up with applications, both for different functionalities, let's call it sales, marketing, HR, as well as for different vertical industries like automobile or pharma or any other industry.
Thank you. I think we've mentioned, I want to go back a little bit. You mentioned challenges for the founders, and obviously you're a founder as well. We spoke about the India diaspora sort of rising influence, and all of you are, and some most of you are here in the room as well. I think we talked about the broader, we talked about remittance, suppressing FDI and the sheer, the large community being the largest India diaspora, but also really successful diaspora. You have, you both are investors, and you're a founder, obviously focusing on the U.S., India, cross-border. What would you say to the founders in the room, as they thinking about expanding into the U.S. market, things that they need to think about as they expand globally? We're seeing more and more Indian founders, not building for India only. You mentioned India overlap with Israel, for example. We always say India is sort of the combination of Israel and China. It has the market opportunity at home, building tailored solution for folks at home. But I think we are seeing more and more founders are building global day one in recent years. I would love to hear your thoughts about how, what do they need to keep in mind? I know you guys are sitting right here in the Bay Area, and obviously you're building your company. Love you hear your thoughts. Maybe you can start, given you have the microphone.
Yeah. So if you look at software, like again, going back to the point that we are seeing innovation in India, both for domestic market as well as for the global market, Software companies coming out of India actually are needing to address global market, not just by choice, but also by necessity. Like India is a great hub for software development, not necessarily one of the greatest software buyers. The IT spend in software isn't at a level that a software company can start in India and think of just scaling 100 million plus, just addressing the domestic market. So that necessitates the companies to address global market, and obviously, US is the first port of entry or the most important port. What all things, yes, I mean, it's not easy in a way that, if the development is happening only in India and the consumption will happen here, the important thing to realize, which we always tell our entrepreneurs, is that your product won't be used because it is being built out of India. Your product will be used because you shine based on whatever metrics, price, performance, vector, compared to what a company is doing out of US, what your competitor out of Europe is doing or competitor out of Israel is doing. So it has to be globally leading product and having a sense of who the users should be. Like today, actually, as we work with companies, first, even before we get to product market fit, we talk about product user fit. Can you find out certain kind of ideal user profile that you're looking for, and will they care about using your product? So, things like that has to be done. And the last point I will say, it's not about hiring a GTM person or go-to-market person in US who will magically sell your product. The founders will be, the best situation is one of the founders can actually move to US earlier, or at least spend significant amount of time in US to be able to make initial sales happen.
The only point I'd add is something actually anecdotally that I've noticed recently. So if you look at the last 5 years or so, software companies that started in India, thinking global from day one, starting to sell internationally and thinking US-based, likely get Delaware incorporated, and then eventually some subset of the founding team will end up moving to the US. So they'll have US operations, R&D usually in India, right? And Bangalore has become such a large hub for it. What I'm noticing now, and I'd say this is in the last year or so, I'm speaking to founders, Indian founders who start in either Bangalore, several from Chennai I've met. I'm from Chennai, so a little plug there. But when I've chatted with them, the interesting thing is they say, I live on a plane. I actually don't live in the US. I don't live in India. I live on a plane and I travel to meet with my customers. Every month I'm in a completely different geography. And I'm truly building for global versus necessarily for the US. Right, and that's something that I'm noticing. I'm very curious how that evolves over the next decade.
I think the things that I would add is one, for founders in India looking to grow globally, is really seek community, and that comes in a bunch of different flavors. One is founders helping founders. I mean, that spirit is so real. And I had a female founder visit San Francisco for SF Tech Week, and a whole bunch of them there was an empty apartment that another founder had, so they just roomed together. So whether it's in terms of logistics like that, and by the way, again, all of that is again $1,000 that you put back into the business, right? So every bit counts. So whether it's founders helping founders in those logistics or advice, when, again, going back to when the SVB community, how it came together when to really bond and to give advice and to share was incredible. So bond with community. Look at also organizations. I see Asha here. Asha Motwani Foundation has how many entrepreneurs that you are nurturing across India and the US? 150, right? And that nurturing and the community that they provide, the investor community, and so tap into each one of those incredible communities and cohorts that are all so invested in helping make you successful.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think you mentioned the Silicon Valley Bank. I think for us, also seeing specifically speak on the India ecosystem. Recently, there was SaaS happening, and we saw the SaaS Boomi folks. There are 200 companies coming from India, and you're seeing all this organization that are literally volunteer-based. That is, their sole goal is to connect founders and obviously connect founders to the whole ecosystem. So I think that's it's a no-brainer, and I totally agree with that. And I think Liz also mentioned it, that the flywheel effect that is happening right now is founders from successful companies are going on to invest in other companies. So it's just not just the capital side of it, but also the the talent and the resources that they can bring from their experience building companies. Really is the only way to go and propel an ecosystem. Okay, time flew really fast, but I do want to ask this question. We definitely are in very interesting times globally, and while I feel like India is sort of flying on a cloud nine, there's so many great things happening. I do want to maybe leave our audience with a few of your thoughts. Maybe each one of you can share as you look into, you're looking ahead. I would love to hear how do you see the Indian startup ecosystem evolving over the next few years? And as you do so, maybe if you can give us your advice on what investors and founders should keep in mind as they build companies, as they invest in companies, not only now but also in the next coming years. What should they pay attention to?
I'm happy to start. So I'd say first and foremost, stick to what I think Indian founders have done incredibly well in the past. Stick to the fundamentals and build long-lasting businesses. Focus on unit economics, focus on what your customer truly wants, focus on that pain point, and then build global from day one, right? And build for a very global audience, understand what customers across different geographies are craving, evolve your product accordingly, and then tap into the amazing network and community of the Indian diaspora as well as the local community in India. I mean, it's going to be the AI hub, I'm very, very convinced, over the next decade, right? And so how do we continue cultivating that? So tap into that and leverage that to create the next Freshworks, ChargeBees, et cetera, of the next decade.
So my mind goes on two thoughts. So one, I think there's a lot of really technology savvy founders, but would love to also see the technology savviness combined with the fundraising savviness. It's a journey, and the whole venture-backed startup era is newer in India than it is certainly in the Valley. And as we see those ecosystems evolve, I would love to see that combination. So that's one. And two, a dream and a wish, whether it's in the US or in the India, is to make sure that we have more female founders and more diverse founders as well. And across all spectrums, whether it's deep tech, whether it is AI, whether it's SaaS, across all of the different emerging spaces.
Yeah, and of course we are all, I'm deeply vested in India's success. Both in spirit as well as by work. We feel that this decade is really for an opportunity for India to lose. If you look at from many different dimensions, software India has been good at. It's only growing from strength to strength. Deep technology, space tech. A democratic and accommodative geopolitical posture that the country has. If you look at the sheer amount of, I would say, interests we are seeing in supply chain diversification onto India, and the push that is going on in manufacturing. Like, I have never thought that a fund like ours, which is totally tech focused, will be doing tech-enabled manufacturing, at least 5 investments over the last 12 months. And I think, these kind of things mean it is not just, obviously, I think the audience in the room will probably care for, especially the entrepreneurs, care for more global companies being built out of India, but massive opportunities out there in what we call digital India innovation, and every sector we can think of has room for transformation using technology. So couldn't be more excited. Going back to the thing that Priya and Kirthiga said, it's doing things there was a time in 2020 and 2021 where things were going at a crazy pace, as if all money was available, which was free. People were chasing valuations not value creation. And that is something I hope that, the entrepreneurs have learned their lessons and they don't go back to it. So really building responsibly, keeping in mind what I'm building, who I'm building for, and ultimately what drives my unit economics. Ultimately, I'm building a business. So that.
Thank you guys. We'll open this for Q&A. If you have questions, just wait for the microphone because we want to actually hear it. Anyone? I know Asha has a question. Someone, you just have to say it loud. Okay, say it loud. Okay.
Okay, so I was wondering if all three of you can tell me a little bit about, you just said something about how you're seeing that India is likely to be a next AI hub. What specifically are you seeing there that gives you that confidence? You can please tell us a bit more, all three of you. What is it, especially is it the people, is it access, is it open source? What exactly is it
Maybe I can start. So a couple of different data points, right? When you look at contributions into open source projects, India is actually a massive contributor there, and that's one major data point. The second one is, as I'm looking at companies in the US and other geographies outside of India that are trying to hire AI talent for their companies, the sales cycle to attract a talent from start to finish is quite long still. I mean, we still have a shortage of amazing AI talent, right? But for Indian companies, the sales cycle is a lot shorter, which tells me that there's definitely a lot more talent out there, right, to tap into. And then also there is still a little bit of a cost difference between the US and India from software engineering talent, AI talent as well, right? It's not going to last for a long time. That bridge is going to be, it's going to be equal eventually. But in the interim, there's a lot of companies I'm actually speaking to companies that aren't started in India. They don't have Indian heritage, but they're trying to actively hire talent and AI and R&D teams only in India. So it's kind of fascinating to see that.
I echo all of that. One thing, Asha, I will add is that if you look at the entire AI stack, there are multiple ways where innovation will be happening. We expect out of India, we'll see a lot more innovation at the user layer, India is the largest developer hub, largest user base of open source. And thankfully, over the last 12 months, after OpenAI first came up with their ChatGPT, the open source in AI has done tremendous amount of progress, like massive progress. And that has led to any innovative mind around, and India has no shortage of that, just by law of numbers. They are just picking things up and surprising us every other day on coming up with, how do you put things together and build something which was not seen before. So I think that's the most exciting part here. And we'll keep on seeing, it will be global for sure. But as far as there are a lot of signs that you will see interesting use cases coming out of India leveraging AI, which probably we haven't even thought of. Like the way, today UPI is taken for granted, but 7 years ago, 10 years ago, if you would have asked, hey, I can go to the Kirana shop and buy something, a candy without using cash, I didn't have an answer, but now it's possible. So I think we'll see something like that.
The only thing that I'd add is a massive investment from the government side, whether it's at a government level, whether it's bodies like NASSCOM, the amount of focus in the universities. And I think that meeting also the fact that India has moved from a place where it used to be more of a services play. When we hired at Facebook in India, I had to do closing calls with parents of the people being hired and answer why they should join Facebook versus join an Accenture or an IBM, right? They're like, why, right? But that mentality has now changed. And the hunger, the drive, the seeing all of those, you can't be what you can't see, examples of entrepreneurs who have built. So there's much more leaning into technology and wanting to use it in innovative ways. And also the circle of entrepreneurs. Again, I remember Ritesh from Oyo when his idea was an idea on the back of a napkin, and now a several billion-dollar company, repeat founders. So the whole infrastructure and the ecosystem is very different today, which will also propel the next wave of great companies.
Anyone?
Jishnu, I think to your point of the application layer, do you see large companies being built there in terms of venture outcomes? And also, second question is, what do you think about the kind of fundamental innovation coming out of India? So deep tech, really fundamental scientific research, which is where I think the US is leading. When do we see like the OpenAI coming out of India?
Yeah, you will see, things might look different. For example, just to talk about example of innovation, we just funded two young kids out of IIT Kharagpur, and they have improvised they have taken open source and done some really significant memory optimizations, which outperforms any model that you can think of today, right? Obviously, they have to build a company, but we got super excited. And that is coming out of just 2 computer science grads from IIT Kharagpur, just graduating, and we got excited enough that a fund like ours actually decided to fund them, right? So as an example. Second, to your second question on can large companies be built? Like when I started investing in SaaS back in 2008, we had no idea that there will be, IPOs in next 10 years. And now we have at least 2 companies which are NASDAQ traded, at least about 10, I can say that, once the IPO market opens up, they will go public. And these are all, I'm talking about SaaS companies, right? There are many, I won't say many because we are sitting in US, so the companies and numbers won't still tie up, but there are a lot of companies which are more than 100 billion ARR, right? So because AI is an enabler, AI will be like any company, one can argue that, any company will be an AI company, whether they include AI to build their software products or they are heavy users of AI, right? So, yeah, I would say, you'll see large companies.
One quick question. You were talking about AI mostly at the application level. Do you think there's untapped opportunity for infrastructure, maybe to build the next NVIDIA? Like something massive to come out of India?
Yeah, 100%. I just don't know whether India is ready for that. So by the way, that is one area, there is huge investment going on in the country, both in academia as well as in industry. And I for one, am definitely looking forward for India's chip prowess to grow. To your point, I think that innovation you will see here, it's actually happening tremendously. And obviously, if the world, today, NVIDIA probably controls 90-95% of the AI compute infrastructure. That cannot be steady state. I'll just say that, right? So
yeah, so there is massive investment happening in the semiconductor industry in India, especially with COVID. It showed that even for companies here that they have to diversify their supply chain, and India has been seen as the other country. Jishnu and I were having the conversation also about India, Vietnam, and all of these in just diversification. And that is, funneling more dollars there. And I am seeing, deep tech companies, of course, not at the same scale as what we are seeing here. But I am seeing, when I met a company in Hyderabad that's being VTOL, vertical takeoff and landing company being funded, right? So we are seeing those seeds. I'd say it's still nascent, but we're certainly seeing the sparks of that. And given the pace at which India innovates, SaaS was, not a thing. It is now. These sparks will all grow. So a decade from now, it'll be a fascinating conversation.
Okay. This one maybe for Jishnu. For companies in your portfolio, beyond the advice that year 2023 is giving to all entrepreneurs, what are the specific sort of cautionary advice you're giving to your portfolio entrepreneurs building from India?
you mean for global?
Yeah, but entrepreneurs building from India, what is sort of the cautionary advice you are giving to them?
So, one is, I would say, when we talk to entrepreneurs, we sometimes sound like broken records. We have been doing it for last 10 years. Now probably we are being paid more attention to than what they listen. I think the idea is really responsible growth, not growth at all cost. Capital, I think entrepreneurs have by now realized that one of the most important asset a non-profitable company can have is their balance sheet cash. It cannot be taken for granted. When we are talking to like, many of our entrepreneurs are, I think the median age probably of our entrepreneurs are in 20s, and they haven't seen any cycles. They have only seen that, there is only one way to go, which is like up. Money is available free, valuation will go up, and everything will be rosy. So that has turned. So I think it is one of the best things that has happened. Obviously, the intensity might also mean that, some of the good companies may not have the opportunity to become great, but at least the responsible way of company building, look at your fundamentals, focus on your product, focus on the users whom you intend to build the product for, and focus on your economics. So that's really what I would say.
Awesome. I'm sure some of you have more questions. I do want to continue to the fun part of the, of the night, and we can continue the conversation over wine. But really, first of all, thank you, Jishnu, Priya, Kirthiga. It's incredible. I think for me, at least, it's really inspiring. And with everything that is happening in India, it's not a set of coincidence. We are seeing the government initiatives. At home, we're seeing sort of rising, global influence, talent everywhere, demographic. It's fair to say that it's India's moment, and I'm really, really excited to work with the founders and the ecosystem partners. So all the founders in the room, I'm happy to chat later. Andy and I are heading to India last week of November, so I'm really excited to be back in market and meeting our clients and partners on the ground. But really, it's India's time. I think we should all be on board on that. So thank you for coming, and let's have some wine.
Thank you.